Hello and welcome to the Better Ways podcast with Tom.
And I'm Jamie.
Hi Jamie, how are you doing this week?
Not too bad. Yeah, life's ticking over. Keep going forward.
Good. I think we should all. It's funny, all of us saying that when there's a war on, and that's one of the
Yes.
things I wanted to talk about tonight. We've touched on it, but we haven't really talked about the Ukraine war.
Hmm.
Um,
It's,
so I think. Shall I start this one off? Is that all right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
I think lots has been said about it, and I don't claim any special knowledge of it. I've never been to
Mm,
Ukraine. I've not been to Russia. I don't have any inside knowledge, but there are some things I don't think people are really talking about too much. I'd like to make a few points on that. So one is
mm,
that I think I said it the last podcast. We are at war, whether or not we
mm.
like to think we are. Uh,
Yeah,
Economically, we definitely are. A
yeah.
lot of people are suffering because of that. Militarily, we are. I'm not sure what's left in the
The
UK in terms
proxy
of
war is
weapons.
underway.
Yeah, we might
Mm.
have a couple of rifles somewhere in Aldershot left, but
Yeah.
a lot of
Bayonets at the end still.
a lot of it's over there.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe our troops aren't on the ground, but we're very much part of it, and we're seen to be part of it.
Mm,
And
mm,
we're training people, and Putin is claiming we're behind. We had the planning and the ideas and the training behind these boat attacks. I don't know if you saw
mm.
that they'd attacked with unmanned. I didn't know they had boat drones, but now we have
Mm.
boat drones. These unmanned
I
boats.
didn't know that.
Yeah,
Mm,
and there was a whole fleet of them, 9 or 10, that went into Sevastopol in Crimea, and several hit boats and caused fires and damage to some of the Black Sea fleet that the Russians have. Um, and presumably it's Ukraine who's done that. I don't think they were in an era where people formally claim responsibility anymore.
yeah.
So
It's
much
always that guy did it. Yeah, yeah.
misinformation, disinformation, all the rest of it. Um, so obviously that's what's triggered the response overnight and today, where
Mm,
Russia's been bombing
mm,
water treatment works, power stations, and Kiev. Um, anyway, so all of that's going on, and we're effectively part of that because of the support we're giving, whether we like to
mm,
think of it as not. And then I think if we're part of the war, you've got to think, what is our aim? Um,
mm,
and it struck me that the aim on both sides is stalemate at the moment.
mm,
I say that for Putin because obviously he tried to have a quick war where he got the
mm,
territory and then he could annex it and then he could get out. And that hasn't worked. And he hasn't got the territory that he's annexed. He's got some of it, but he's been losing
mm,
recently. Um, he's had to do the mobilisation, but I think that he's holding out for our will to wane.
mm,
In particular, I think he's hoping that the American midterm elections will put
mm,
Republicans in charge of the Senate and the House, and then they will not support the war in the same way. They'll pressure
mm.
Ukraine for peace talks. They'll withdraw funding. They might withhold specific military hardware. There's lots of talk in the Republican side of. Well, certainly, there's a part of the Republicans who really don't want to be at war in Ukraine,
Mm,
and don't see it as their problem or their war or their fight. Um,
mhm.
so I think he's also hoping that the Europeans and ourselves will get tired of energy costs and prices, and will put pressure on Ukraine for peace.
Yeah,
And then he'll be able to agree in that peace significant territory which he can claim as a victory. Um,
yeah,
which might not be everything that he's annexed, but might be a substantial part of it. So I think that's on
yeah,
his side. I think on our side, we've played without saying so. We've played for stalemate because we don't want Russia to win, but we
yeah,
sure as hell don't want them to lose because of what that could mean with
yeah,
nuclear weapons, right?
yeah,
And so the easiest way to do that is to give Ukraine just enough that they can fight and initially push the Russians back and then maintain.
mhm,
But we have still resisted giving them the kinds of weapons that could inflict bigger damage or proper
yeah,
defensive screen against missiles. And we're slowly giving them more and more.
mhm,
And, there isn't that much more maybe that we could give them after a certain point. But I think that we are kind of playing for a stalemate in the hope that Russia will collapse or Putin will be
yeah,
miraculously taken out of existence on the inside.
yeah,
And I think that's just as misguided, really. I don't think Putin is right to think that the will change that much, and I don't think we're right to think that they will collapse or he will be deposed.
Mm,
So I think this is looking like potentially a long conflict, unless
hmm
one side does crumble.
hmm
But I don't. I'd like to. I can see the logic of that, playing for a stalemate. You don't want them to lose,
mm,
but I don't feel that we're people are openly talking about that or calling it what it is.
mm,
I think there's a pretense that we're doing everything we can. I don't think
mm.
we are. Now, that's not to say that I know what the solution is. There's lots of bad scenarios, um, but it strikes me that usually in these situations, playing for time suits everybody.
Yeah,
Because you
yeah,
all the time the war is going on, but you're not losing or winning. You haven't lost, or you can hold
yes,
up. You can say you will win, and you haven't lost yet.
yeah,
And I think that,
yeah.
that that comes into it quite a lot. What do you think?
I think you've absolutely nailed it. Well, that was a great podcast. Let's turn this off and go to bed. Yeah, no, you're right. You're 100% right because, and I think you're right. It's not overtly spoken of in those terms, but if you follow enough people, experts in this field, etc., and you read between the lines on a lot of them, yes, you're absolutely 100% right. One of the worst things that we could do is if Ukraine started attacking Russian mainland territory, because if they did that, Putin would absolutely declare war and mobilize everything, and then you would have World War III. That's just what would happen because it'd spill over. So you're right. It's almost like we have done exactly that. We've tried to build a metallic border across Ukraine saying you can't go any further this way, and we're going to keep pushing you back, pushing you back, and pushing you back. It wouldn't surprise me if 100 years from now they look back at this war at this time period and go, they never formally declared peace, but it just kind of simmered
Yeah,
down, and and kind of people just kind of like forgot about it and kind of got on with it. You're right. You're right in what you said. Yes, the Republicans, I think, are gonna, if they get legislative authority and if they can influence it, I think you're right. I think they're going to spin it and go, we can't do this. And I think that'd be an absolute disaster for the world because you'd have a rampant Russia on your doorstep. I don't think European will falter that much, despite George Galloway's best attempts on Twitter to make it look as if Europe is up in arms, trying to stop, providing aid to Ukraine. He's full of crap, and that's not the way it is. But yeah, you've absolutely nailed it. Now, where does this end outside of that war that kind of doesn't really ever stop, but no one really goes anywhere with it?
well, yeah.
Can
I
you
mean,
give Putin a path out? Can you give him a path out? I mean, what outside of territory? You said territory, Tom, and that's obviously
yeah.
Ukraine. I don't think Ukraine will cede territory. I genuinely don't think they will. But what if it wouldn't surprise me if there's some paper thin document that gets signed at the end that says, Ukraine will not join NATO for X amount period of years. They will not allow missiles to be stationed within 200 miles of the border. They will not allow, X, Y, Z. There'll be moves against fascism and Nazism in the Ukrainian government, all that type of stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if there's some kind of written paper declaration, but there's no kind of there's no territory ceded, and Russia doesn't have to pay reparations, for example. It wouldn't surprise me if that's the way that it wound up. And we all
Yeah.
know it's a lie. We all know it'd be a con, but we'd all just want shit, excuse my French, we'd all just want stuff to get back to normal, including the Ukrainians, so they can get on with their
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a good outcome for Ukraine, but I don't know. I think it's more likely they would have to give up some territory. I agree they
Mm,
won't, and they won't want to. And it kind of
mm,
feels like actually even talking about this, people really get angry.
very angry.
But I'm going to say it anyway. I think wars tend to end either in victory for one side or the other,
Mm,
outright, or more often than not, there's some territory change and then some treaty.
mm, mm,
And borders have moved around all over the place.
yeah.
I wouldn't be. I think you're right that whilst Ukraine has enough superiority to hold on, fight back, and even take back territory, then of course they're going to
Mm,
want everything back. But if that stops being the case, because I think you've got to
mm.
realise, I don't think people realise how big Russia is.
Bloody huge.
So they've mobilised something like, well, formally they've said it's 300,000, but it could
Yeah.
easily have been double that because there's some doubt that they have any particular control on the numbers because it's all.
Oh, I thought it was less because they were having problems with it.
No, they're not all at the front yet. I think about half of them have been dispatched to the front. Half of them are still being trained. They haven't got enough transport to actually get them all there.
No, and not enough equipment.
No, but what you got to remember is that they could mobilise millions. Like they did before. I mean, when you think of First World War, Second World War, millions and tens of millions. And that's with a smaller population then. And they could switch to a war economy and produce a lot more equipment, even if they're finding it difficult to get supplies. So there is certainly a long way to go. Now it's debatable how much untrained troops, conscript troops who don't want to be there, who've had no training, who've got no ammunition, who've bought their own uniforms, these other things we've been hearing about. How effective are they? Well, not very, but they can man defensive positions.
Exactly.
And that can give you the stalemate, or that can give you the inability to take back the territory.
That's true.
It could be very hard for Ukraine to break that down without some more sophisticated weapons, or giving them more. So I think that's one possibility, that there ends up needing to be some kind of agreement where perhaps even just Crimea.
Formally cede Crimea. Yeah.
Now I'm not saying that's right, but that's a good thing, and I don't think.
But it might be an inevitability. Yeah.
Well, you've got to think. See, what worries me is not Putin. So I know he's bad and mad in some respects, although I think he's rational in other respects. I mean, would he use nuclear weapons? He might. I think it's probably not likely. But what worries me is if he is deposed, what does Russia become? Because there's all of these powerful men, some with their own private armies, like the guy who runs the Wagner private military that's fighting in Ukraine at the moment.
Yeah.
You could see a kind of Afghanistan situation where it degenerates into lots of factions and people fighting over pieces. And then what happens to all the nuclear weapons?
Yeah. Well, that was what, after USSR collapsed, that was a similar thing, wasn't it?
Here's the irony. Here's the irony, and here's why we don't want to stop fighting, and why we don't want, in particular, the treaty that formed Ukraine, that was signed by Russia in the 1990s, when the Soviet Union dissolved. At the time, we pressured the Ukrainians to give up their nuclear weapons.
Give up their nukes. Yeah.
They had a load of nuclear weapons. Precisely because we were worried what would happen to Ukraine and whose hand would they fall into. So we guaranteed their safety in return for giving up their nuclear weapons. Had we not done that, I don't think Russia would have considered invading them. It might have gone somewhere else. But so there's a lot of history there, and but I think it's a bit like how I felt about Trump. I was more worried about what would happen if you got a Trump who actually had a clue, had a plan, and could get things done. Rather than a narcissist who didn't know, who just wanted to be president.
Had no idea what he did when he got there.
No idea what actually wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
What if you got a populist elected who actually had a plan? Not just a white cap, but a plan. And actually was also charismatic and popular and other things. So you got to kind of beware in these scenarios. I mean, none of this is an argument for Putin being there.
Yeah. With you, I'm with you. Yeah.
Or for having had Trump, but I do think people don't realise that there's a whole lot worse that could follow. That could be a lot less under our control.
True.
If that happened.
Yeah, I totally get where you're going. I do agree with that, because you always think, like, if you replace the devil, is the next devil going to be even worse? You don't know, do you? And with Putin, that is a distinct possibility. Let's face it, if there was a coup tomorrow, the chances of him being replaced by a pro-Western pacifist are practically zero. So you are rolling the dice with something a lot worse. Yeah. So God, that's a terrifying thought in itself. When you were talking there about the Trump, and what if you had a smart Trump, a smart populist that actually had a vision and plan and can get things done? Well, let's explore, we're going to go a little bit off topic here, but let's explore that in a bit more detail, because I think that is exactly what is going to happen in 2 years' time. It's just a guess, but so far I've been pretty good at my political projections over the last few years. I think Ron DeSantis will be the Republican frontrunner. I think he'll run. and I think he will win. He will get at least one term. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets a second term as well, because if you look at the polling on various issues in the United States, he's not what Ron DeSantis talks about is not and it's not unspoken. It's in the public consciousness, it's in the public eye, it's what people are legitimately worried about. So they're worried about crime, they're worried about jobs, they're worried about education, those things. So we could call him a populist, but maybe if in some ways that term is actually no, he's just listening to what his people are worried about, and he's going to do something about it. Now, it's the what you do about them that's obviously going to be what he's judged on. If he goes complete fat crazy loon on it, then that's dangerous. But what if a populist who actually listens to the legitimate concerns of the population was right? And what if he implemented policies to fix those things and it worked for the better? Would we be sitting here decrying it in 4 years or 8 years' time?
Well, yeah, it's kind of, would you really not want a benevolent dictator?
Yeah.
But I'm not so much talking about him. I think he's okay. We've got pros and cons, but he is fairly conventional in the sense that he's already a governor. He's come up through the party.
He's not batshit crazy.
He looks good. He looks good by comparison with Trump, but maybe not on some other metrics. But I'm talking about all right. How about this? Suppose Kanye or Ye,
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Ye ran or
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or somebody who's got no background but has got a big following.
Yeah.
Because essentially that's what Trump did. He had no political experience. He had no political background. Although he was actually a Democrat earlier on in the 80s and 90s. But
he was. Yeah.
But somebody like that could be mad and bad.
God, that's a scary thought.
And if you've opened the doors to that by electing a populist who came from nothing, if you've had the precedent of it, and also not just the precedent but the template for how you do it, then that could happen again. And I'm not sure you can make the same argument over here because we haven't had somebody who wasn't already Boris Johnson was already he'd been in the media a lot, but he became a politician. It didn't go straight in. It's not.
You have to be an MP.
You have to be an MP. You have to get into a party. Yeah. You're therefore bound by your party to some extent, although he wasn't very much. But I think it's harder. So all of this.
That's an interesting thought.
It's sometimes better the devil you know. Is it possible that Putin would accept going back to the border and giving up everything? I can't see it, but maybe if things were that bad and he really didn't want to use nukes, then maybe he would. I fear the peace will lie, as it often does, with some messy compromise, which is unfair to everybody.
But you're right. That does tend to be what happens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You are right. Yeah. That does tend to be what happens. And then how do you convince the Ukrainian people to accept that? But then also, there's nothing to stop him doing it again in 10 years' time and annexing another bit and another bit because...
I think putting them in NATO is probably the answer to that.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
As I say, we've already made this deal with them, which we're supposed to be honouring to defend them anyway. So we kind of made them a special case anyway. And that was way back in the 90s, and now we are defending them and have applied, and maybe we'll not call it NATO, but so that might be a political fudge that there's some group of countries that agree to defend Ukraine that isn't called NATO. That is okay. That is the solution, a political solution to Russia saying that we can't have Ukraine in NATO.
That's an interesting idea. Could they get away with that? How would I don't know? Well,
I think it's all about to make any deal, there has to be something that both sides want. So
ascension to the EU would do that, wouldn't it? Because the EU charter, you're protected, aren't you? If one country's invaded, they all have to defend. So that could be the workaround actually from NATO.
Include the Americans, so that might be enough. And so you have to have something like that because so we have to think, well, what will Putin want? Well, he'll want a victory. So something has to be portrayed as a victory. Probably want some territory because it's probably not realistic for him to claim victory if there's nothing. But we don't know what size that would be. and those are probably, and he'll probably want some guarantee around NATO.
Mm.
And then what will the Ukrainians want? Well, they'll want their country back as much of it
Yeah.
as possible. They'll want to be protected. They'll want membership of something, whether it's the
Mm.
EU or NATO, or we can create something. So I think that's quite possibly where it will go.
I think you're probably right.
But right now we're in the stalemate, and that could continue for a long time. And the stalemate, and if it does go on for a long time, it becomes an effective peace if the firing stops and the borders quieten down. If that happens, then
and people just don't talk about it anymore.
well,
are we still there?
Yeah, such things have happened before, but yeah. So I just wanted to bring those things up because I thought I don't seem to be hearing people talking like that. There's a lot of talk about winning, and I don't see how we win without losing.
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree. I totally agree.
And obviously, if Russia wins, we all lose. So yeah.
I'll tell you what. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's not a simple situation, is it? It's in the slightest. What does annoy me though, and again, I think we probably both know people that fall into this camp, is listen, I'm not a soldier. I could never sign up to the military. I'm not a fighter. I'm not a lover either, but I'm not a fighter for sure. I know that damn well. So it's easy for me to sit here and talk about it. But, some people that I think we both know would probably class themselves as the pacifist group, and they are literally like, just roll over. Just get give them what they want, And unfortunately, appeasement of a tyrant never, ever, ever, ever works out well. What Putin has done incredibly well is as a nuclear power, he's rolled the dice. How do you deal with a threatening nuclear power that doesn't end in mutually assured destruction? No one has an answer to that question, do they? Because we don't know, unless the Americans have followed through on Reagan's Star Wars plan and can actually shoot nukes out of the air, which I don't think they can do. I think we're still in that paradox, that quandary, aren't we? It's it's an incredibly tough one, and I think you're right. I think probably the average person reading the papers and doesn't think that much about it, probably doesn't think about it to this much level of detail. But when you sit down and you follow the logic chain from here to here, it's not a simple. There's no easy way out. It's incredibly difficult. And I think you're probably right. Maybe they will end up giving Crimea. Maybe they will end up losing Donbass, wherever else. But the price, the reward, that's a horrible thing to say, but the counterweight to that is they get EU membership, which means they get EU protection. That stops Putin from chewing off any more territory in the future. And they can build a ring of steel on that side of the border if they have to.
Yeah, although you could see it from that point of view that they thought they had this guarantee from us already.
Yeah.
So, difficult one, but you segue us nicely, I think, into another topic when you talked about shooting things out the sky as Star Wars. So, of course, what's new in space is all these Starlink satellites owned by Mr. Musk, which apparently are proving quite decisive for Ukraine in terms of battlefield communications and instant reporting and ability to understand what's going on. And certainly not a technology the Russians have. Russian communications seem to be, mainly based around mobile phones, which they can actually tap. The Ukrainians can tap, and we can tap. So, so that seems to have made a big difference. But thinking about Mr. Musk, the other thing in the news is the purchase of Twitter.
Which has made a lot of heads explode.
Yeah. So what do you make of him buying Twitter? Where are you on that?
Look, what's hilarious to me is I avoided Twitter like the plague because I thought it was just an evil cesspit. And then the only reason I started using it was because my trains on my commute where I used to live before was so bad. The only communication you got was from the rail company Twitter teams. That's the only reason I created a profile. Only reason I signed up. And then once you go down that rabbit hole, it is absolutely remarkable how much of a dumb place Twitter is for probably 90% of its usage. Yeah. And what I mean by that is you got a lot of idiots, frankly, from both sides and middle as well, that are locked in terrible patterns of thinking. And I mean terrible patterns of thinking. What makes me laugh is the visceral Trumpist hatred. So the people that hate Trumpists and hate Republicans from supposed Democrats and left-leaning on Twitter, they call them evil, they think they're idiots, and you follow the way that these people think on the left a lot of the time, And you're like, you're falling in exactly the same trap that Trumpist has fallen in. You're refusing to look at context, you're refusing to look at nuance, you're refusing to look at logical evidence, and you're resorting to name calling. Yeah. So when you realise that and Twitter has been massively biased for years anyway, and there's a lot of evidence going that way. And of course, people did the whole, well, if you don't like it, start your own platform, go somewhere else. It's a private business, do what they want. And then the minute Elon Musk comes in and buys it and goes, actually, we're getting rid of the bias and whatnot, they are wetting the bed and go, oh, it should be it's the public square. It should be owned by the public. The principles do not exist on that platform. They really don't.
Yeah, there seems to be a big inconsistency in how people have been over it. But yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting. See, I've got, I feel a few things about it. So yeah, like you, I've not really engaged with it much. I went on it.
I have the last 6 years.
Went on it when it was new, or relatively new, maybe 2008, 2009, quite a bit. But then, it became, like you say, a bit of a cesspit, and I stopped engaging with it. Stopped engaging with social media generally because it became quite negative. But, yeah, I think he's got a shot at fixing it. So what's the case for? Well, he gets things done, and he's a technology guy. And I think there's lots of things that they obviously haven't done on Twitter, which they could. So, and I don't know how they're going to fix it. But for example, you would think that a social media system of some sort like Twitter would have a way of actually scoring reputation. Everybody would have a reputation score, and your reputation score would be influenced by the feedback you get from people and their reputation scores. So obviously people with a high reputation would have a higher weight in commenting on your reputation. And if there was a way of putting that technology into the system, then obviously somebody who's creating bots, their bots are going to get a very bad reputation very quickly, and would be very easy to, in that sense, filter out. So
right.
I think that's just one idea, whether you call it reputation or something else. There's lots of. I'm just using that as an example of a technical solution that the kind of technical solutions that he could experiment with and try, and see if that fixes it. Because actually, Twitter's functionality has been very slow to evolve. They've been very slow to develop it. They've had lots of problems, and I think he'll do it much more quickly. So I think that is a kind of plus point. And maybe through that he'll iterate it towards something that is much more productive. Because I think we are in the infancy of social media, right? We are in the dark ages. We've just discovered fire, and we're burning ourselves. But we might well, we haven't discovered yet how to make it useful.
No.
So that's an argument for it, and an argument against is that it's impossible to win. It'll always be a cesspit. It'll under its own weight. It needs too much human engagement. You can't find a way to get the balance. You'll never be able to comply with all the laws, even if you wanted to. And maybe he should create a new platform from scratch and prove that works in a small way before changing one that's already there and actually trying to change it in flight when it's at scale. So those are reasons why he could fail at it, I think. So I don't know whether it's going to succeed or not, but I think it's good that somebody's trying to do something useful with it.
It's tall order. It's a really tall order, because the problem is Twitter is basically bullying. It's
not all of it, but yeah, there are a lot.
But what I mean is it's cult-like thinking. And then it's combined, so it's the worst aspects of human nature in a petri dish, basically. So you could take a very nuanced position that is backed up by evidence and statistics, and it will be torn to shreds, and you'll be labelled X, Y, and Z, and they'll question your motives and say, blah, blah. They'll never question the evidence. They'll just question you as a person and your motive. And that style of attack comes from all sides. So you could be like, it's mad. It's absolutely insane to me that you could put the most. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's just touch on another topic you and I consider talking about. You could put a evidence-based left-wing view on immigration or a solution to immigration on there, and you will be attacked by two streams of people, and I mean vicious bile. You would have the far right being racist and anti-immigration, but you would also have the left and I include the centre left and far left in that, who would attack you for thinking that any form of immigration controls, or for example, are a form of fascism. So unfortunately, it's weird, Tom. I now sit on the spot where I think there is no social media platform that you can build that would be a good ecosystem. Okay,
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, because there was something else. Have you? It's not. Was it Clubhouse or something like that? Not the one that we know of. There was something else. There was an app where people could go on and talk about topics, and other people join the room, and then they can get involved.
Yeah, there's a few like that. There's lots of other social media. There's Parler and there's
This one's
the thing that so yeah, I hear you. It's difficult, and it may not be successful. But I think what Musk is talking about is not stopping that, but allowing you to tune in and tune out. So if you don't want to hear, if you don't want to hear the extremes on both sides, you can turn them off and get what.
You can do that anyway, can't you? Just block people. That's what I do.
Yeah, but it's really annoying to do it at the moment because you have to mute or block individual people.
Right. I see. Okay.
He's talking about something that's potentially much more sophisticated than that allows you to decide what kinds of. Because basically, I mean, I think what he's saying is you should be free to say what you want as long as it's legal, and you're not inciting violence or
committing a legitimate hate crime. Yeah,
doxing somebody or something similar. You can do that, but you also you have a right to choose what you listen to. So what Twitter doesn't have at the moment, yes, you can mute people, yes, you can block people, but that's after the fact, and that's per person. And if it's as much if it's a bot as if it's a left wing or right wing activist, there's more and more of them. So they keep popping up. So he's talking about also having a way to say, well, I want to tune into this range of opinion, and some people might want everything, and some people might want to be on one end and one on the other end, stick in the middle. And you might want to change it, and at different times you might feel like one or the other, or you might dip in or dip out.
Okay.
So if you could, and I'm not saying this is possible, but I think it's
yeah.
But if you could do that effectively, whether it's with humans plus AI or whatever, that is an interesting proposition because
that's a brilliant idea.
Isn't that what used to happen? So going back to the real town square, you always had loonies on the left and the right, but people would ignore them. And there was a social cost to being ignored because they were able to voice their opinions, but that would actually not get them friends in the same way.
Yeah.
Now, if you were able to filter out what you can hear, that would have the same effect. They might well be able to talk to their small groups, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to reach the wider. I mean, this is the problem with Twitter. Everything goes global.
Yeah.
Instantly, and it's like everyone's got the megaphone in the town square at the same time.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I think it'd be interesting to see if he can do it. He's obviously not doing it. He's doing it because he believes in it. I can't see him making a lot.
He won't make money. No. But they said he owes 12 billion. I think the deal's 44 billion.
Yeah, there's 12 billion of financing that he's got from other people, and then there's shares and cash and but that's not normal in these sorts of deals.
Do you know anything about his I think it's X app, isn't it? I think
I do.
Yeah, because he said that Twitter will bring that forward 5 years. I think he said.
What most people don't realise is that in places like China, there are these apps which do everything. They do your banking, they do social media, all types of communication, shopping. So think of it's sort of what would it be? Apple or Samsung Pay plus Amazon plus Google plus email plus WhatsApp plus Twitter.
That's interesting.
Parts of the government, and so everything is housed in a single app, and the app allows you to do things like transact with people wherever they are, send them monies, and all sorts. It's all in one place. Whereas in the West, what we've got is lots of separate technologies that do that, and they might come together on your phone that you've got separate apps.
Yeah.
But they're owned by different people. They're run by different people. They don't integrate to the same level. And so in China and other parts of Asia, that they have these hugely dominant super mega apps, I suppose you call them. So he's
interesting.
X. The idea of X is to provide a single solution that does all of that. And what he would do is then grow Twitter into payments, grow Twitter into So, talking already about extending the tweets so you can start competing with Substack. Right now, people take Substack, things they write on Substack, and they just chop it up into tweets, and it's kind of annoying and irritating. So why not just be able to post the whole thing, and then you've got a following on Twitter, you've got a following on Substack. You could add email integration if you wanted. You can always get when you get Twitter to email you about stuff. So that pulls that in. Then you
that's really exciting. Sorry to interrupt. That's PayPal. Really exciting. Yeah, that's brilliant. See, this is where
if it's Starlink, then maybe it's also your broadband.
Yeah. Do you know what, Tom? This is amazing to me because
this is good. I'm not saying it's good because too much power in one place could be bad.
There is that. But I was just going to say I think that's absolutely kind of like it just shows. I like to think I'm a relatively switched on bloke, pretty decent brain in my head. But when I look at that, like I'm like, ants in a playground of giants with stuff like that, because I'm like, I would never have thought about that in a million years. It's just my brain. I'm not. When it comes to kind of apps, I'm not creative enough. But that's where I think someone, as much as criticism as he gets, someone like Elon Musk, and I don't understand half the criticism he gets, to be honest, but he has an idea, doesn't he? He goes, right, this is it, and it's out there. It's how the effing hell do we get there? And I love that because people like him drive innovation forward.
Well, this is the weird thing. He describes himself as a centrist, maybe centre-left. I think that's probably accurate. He's often painted as a right-wing Nazi. But I think, at least he's... people often point to him and say he's a billionaire, he must be evil. But he's a self-made person, so he's built these companies that have done amazing things with rocketry and electric cars and energy, and now he's doing the Neuralink thing, which is my computer interface, and he's boring tunnels, and he's now going to build a domestic robot that we, the kind of iRobot thing that we always saw in our childhood, we were always told we would have by now. It's all technology and hard engineering and making it, now, of course, putting a technologist in charge of things can go very badly wrong. But you do get a lot of progress and change. So that's one point. But I do think I think people don't like him because he isn't. I think it's because he isn't in a camp. So he's not really a Democrat or a Republican. He doesn't subscribe to a particular ideology. He has viewpoints are different in different places. So it's more of an issue for him. Which issue it is for him dictates what he thinks. And he's and he's a maverick, and he's prone to make little jokes, and he's got a sense of humour, and he doesn't behave like a CEO. I think a lot of it is he does stupid things. He tweets stupid things. He
tweets very stupid things.
He has to delete stuff.
He does. He does.
I like because it's like, well, that's a regular person.
Yeah, you're human. Yeah, exactly.
Other people think, well, no, you're not supposed to be like you're an important CEO.
You have to be perfect.
Very serious and gravitas and noble and drenching yourself in virtuous things that you're doing. I think actually he is doing a lot of virtuous things.
I agree.
People often say, why don't you use your fortune to save the planet? And he says, that's what I am doing.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's exactly what he's doing.
The SpaceX is about rockets to save humanity in the long run by becoming a multi-planetary species.
Yeah. These people are morons, aren't they? These people are just morons. They are just morons. Like, it's so frustrating to see, people that I think a lot of whom, not all, certainly not all, but a lot of whom come. So you get the two camps again, don't you? You've got the people that are just, they're bitter people and they want to lash out, and that's what they do. They just want to lash out at somebody who they feel they can latch onto and just attack. But then you've got that other people, they get dragged along in that madness. And I remember when he put the offer in to buy Twitter and it was accepted, and some lady, everyone was commenting on Twitter, and some lady went, oh my God, even though I own a Tesla, blah, 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 I can't believe I just read about Neuralink, how evil he's going to take over try to take over people's brains. And I was like, are you a moron? This is supposed to help disabled people. People have lost physical control of their bodies, to be able to regain control of their bodies, stuff like that. Are you an idiot? You're just going along with the crowd here because you've been told you hate someone and you should. What if we're seeing the pushback against this madness now? Finally, after 6 years of madness, we're seeing the pushback against crazy thinking on all sides. Hopefully, crazy thinking on all sides being pushed back against. But social media is such a powerful factor within that craziness. It amplifies idiots. I saw one earlier on, and it was just hilarious. It was getting torn to pieces. A young lady witnessed a dance that was being taught by someone, but because the person teaching it was not from the background where the dance came from, this person witnessing it was, and I'm not kidding here, I will use the words, traumatized, suffered emotional trauma, and has started a GoFundMe campaign to get over her trauma. Right? So,
quite enterprising, yeah.
It is enterprising, but if you read it, it's actually crazy.
So this is the thing. Oh, sorry, I'm wagging my finger, but this is the thing that that annoys me about, let's take the Just Stop Oil people, or Extinction Rebellion, or Greta Thunberg and others. It's not the cause, and I don't doubt their passion. It's the fact that they're not creating a solution.
Yeah.
So what they do is they protest with a very vague and unrealistic solution, like eliminate fossil fuels or get rid of oil.
Yeah, a T-shirt slogan.
Something that's not practical. What they don't do is actually do the kind of thing that Musk does, which is all right. Let's take one small part of that, like ocean pollution.
Yeah.
How could I create some technology or build something that would help reduce plastics in the ocean or something like that?
Yeah.
They don't actually apply themselves to finding small solutions, which collectively, if lots of people did that, and if they're as passionate as they say about their cause, would add up to making a big difference. What they want to do is capture the narrative, and always with these, it's always very apocalyptic. We're all going to die unless we all do this completely unrealistic thing that we could never do.
Yeah.
And until we do that, then we're just going to do protests however we like.
I agree.
It's a kind of childlike. Okay, that's
it is childlike.
Helpful.
Exactly.
Even if you're right about the issue, which you might be, you're not helping. You're not. You're not driving awareness really, because what you're doing is actually putting people off. I mean, I don't think Just Stop Oil is generating any people who want less oil.
No,
it's generating people who want protesters to be pulled off the roads.
Exactly, you're turning people against the cause.
And it's potentially you'll get repressive laws that stop people protesting at all.
Absolutely, you'll damage it for everybody else by what you're doing.
It's not an effective lobby. And this is what really maddened me about the Insulate Britain people. That is actually one of the most sensible things we should be doing.
Absolutely right.
But they've made it toxic.
Yeah, they have absolutely made it toxic. By engaging
in this stupid form of protest that doesn't help.
Yeah.
Whereas if they'd actually been maybe doing a milder form of protest, but actually saying, when they got some attention, which they did early on, here's some practical, specific schemes, and I'm sure there are some of them who've been interviewed who've said this. If there'd been a much stronger concerted push to get people on side for those schemes, rather than alienating the general population, then maybe some of those schemes would now be policy.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
That's what's needed. That's what annoys me about these groups, that it's and why I've got a lot of time for people like Musk, even though he's a billionaire, which I think is a problem. I mean, any concentration of wealth in one person, as he gets more and more powerful, he might press the wrong button one day.
Yeah. But that, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Or do something malevolent. It's possible.
Yeah, but it's easy, isn't it, to identify a problem? It's very easy because the world is not perfect. And it's very easy to take any problem and go, this is terrible. But it's very, very difficult to come up with a solution. Yes. We know this.
Often there are no good options. And
no, but also it's what's the word? It's not an arbiter. It's an abdication of responsibility as well. Because you're right. So if there was a PhD student working in climatology or whatever that was kind of like, or some form of technology that was doing something, go, right, so who are you? I represent XYZ. I've actually if we insulated homes, you could solve X amount of problem, but I've created this new material, we're working together, we've got a charity behind it, it's great. I think a lot of people go, oh my God, that actually sounds really impressive and brilliant, well done. But of course, that's too much like hard work, though, Tom. That is the problem. Like, solutions are not easy. They are not easy. You're exactly what you said. You can have the T-shirt slogan, if you will, stop oil, all this stuff. And I remember, and I don't like her, and I disagree with everything she says, but Julia Hartley-Brewer had a conversation with one of the activists And again, it was to stop oil or stop whatever. And she goes, okay, if we stop that right now, what do you think would happen tomorrow? Well, I don't know, Julia. I'm only 17, I'm only 18, I don't have the answers. So you're demanding something without understanding the consequences of what you're demanding, expecting people to do it without replacing it with a solution. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, right, brilliant, no problem at all. So when millions of people starve, it's not your fault, is it? Like, it's just, you've got to grassroots movements. I think they are good for moving the public needle in terms of consciousness and
Oh
awareness.
yes,
But you're
yes.
right.
I'm not
If they're
against
not backed with solutions,
Yeah, so let's be clear. I'm not against grassroots
no.
movements. You do need to make people aware of problems, and that part of what those groups have done is good. But there comes a point where you have to help generate decent solutions, and also not expect everything overnight. I mean, even if you wanted to get off oil, it would take at least 50 years to remove it from most of the economy, let alone the parts that we can't. We have for where we have no substitutes, which is large parts of plastics and cosmetics and others. There's no alternative. You couldn't do it in a small amount of time.
No, you can't. It's impossible. Yeah. But have I told you about the seaweed? Have we discussed the seaweed or kelp? I can't remember what it was. Did I bring so. No. Okay. It's one of those ones where I catch something out the corner of my eye, probably because it's on Twitter or Facebook, and then you go to the article and you read it and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I always think, I should tell Tom about this. But there was a guy, he's a scientist, I think he's a biologist or something like that, or a marine biologist, and there's a certain form of seaweed, I'm sure it was seaweed, there's a certain form of seaweed that is exceptional at sucking in carbon. And he's done something to it, or he's modified it in some way. But the idea is it can now store in a huge amount of carbon. And they found a way to link it. So the idea was you create an island, which is pretty bloody massive. It's about the size of, I don't know, France or Germany, sitting in the middle of the Pacific or something like that. The idea that would be is when this seaweed sucks in carbon, it can suck in a hell of a lot, and then it gets heavy. And what naturally happens is it sinks to the bottom of the ocean, so it doesn't cause any harm, it doesn't cause any damage or anything like that. So when we release carbon by mining and burning oil and all this stuff, and it goes into the air, we've now found a way basically of sucking it out and putting it back down to where it should be.
Yeah.
And what he was talking about was they've got a load of investors, so it sounds like it could have legs behind it. They will sell CO2 credits to businesses and to countries that don't have the green tech to be able to wean themselves off fossil fuels. But the number that he said, I think he said, like, this one solution alone would remove 1/50th of what has to be removed to keep the world in a safe place, if you like. There's still a hell of a long way to go, but what's a first step if we can get behind something like that? That's a solution, actual solution.
Yeah, I mean, most of the solutions to climate change are adaptation; they're not mitigation.
Yeah, they're not mitigation, no, because we can't stop using oil. We just can't do it.
Even if we did, we're less than 1%.
Yeah.
The China isn't, India isn't, and Africa, when they're all going to industrialize, and it's going to go on for at least a century.
Yeah.
So the sensible thing, I mean, is to invest, as you say, in technologies that could mitigate, that could help us adapt to it. And that could be some of them could be mitigation of reducing CO2, but others could be just adapting where we live and how we live and
seawalls and so on.
It's not such a big. It's not the argument is between 1 or 2 feet a century, right? So that for us, that's a problem, but that's surmountable. It's more of a problem if you're a low-lying Pacific island. But the funny thing is, even those, like the Maldives, I was reading, has been expanding because they're reclaiming land to put new holiday dwellings for British people and others to come and have faster than the sea is rising. So most people don't. Now, could there be a catastrophic increase and rise? Well, we know there can be because there was at the end of the last ice age, but that's because masses of ice melted, and a lot of the ice has now melted. There's still more that can go. But ice takes. This is the other thing that people don't realise. The ice takes large bodies of ice take thousands of years to melt because only the outer skin is in contact with the higher temperatures. And if you're in the North or South Pole and it's it changes from -50 to -48, there's still not a hell of a lot of melting going on Is it still
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah,
So it's not that that it couldn't happen, but I think that we over sensationalize the timescales, and the movies make it seem like it could be very quick. Whereas you could adapt to things like that. And of course, in the long run, the bigger danger is presumably going to be another ice age. And maybe the answer to that is to generate loads of CO2.
Yes, we're all out there just burning as much shit as we can.
I'm not joking. I mean, it might be, because we know that very cold, and we know we're near the high. We're not at the highest temperature it's ever been, but we're one of the warmer periods.
Yeah.
You know, and some of that's natural, and some of that's man-made, and that's fine. But we know when it becomes cold in an ice age, it gets very cold, and that's a big problem, because you don't get crops growing. You don't have food. You need masses more energy to heat than to cool.
Yeah.
And harder to adapt to it. Far many more people dying each winter than die in the summer from heat. It doesn't make the news.
In this country, in this country.
Everywhere. Globally, it's several times as many.
Well, not in India and Pakistan, but it's reaching 50+ degrees, and they've got massive droughts and stuff. Yeah.
Yes, but if you take the global figures, so yes, there are countries where it's not true.
And that's the problem, isn't it? It's going to be those countries that really suffer as a result of climate change. It won't be the flooding. Pakistan flooding, for example, is a good example of that. But the droughts, and the severe droughts and so on, that's a problem. But I do think there's mitigation factors with those, because I know that if you plant certain types of trees, you can almost change the climate, can't you, in certain areas?
So coming back to the point, there's lots of mitigation and adaptation that we could be investing in. Which would make it possible to react, because these things are not happening quickly. Which means that it doesn't have to be. It's not the end of everything. It's not the end. At the moment, you think the planet's on fire and it's the end of the world, and it's just a modern version of the end of the world is nigh. It's not true.
Bloody hope not. I've still got a few years left, I hope. Touch wood. So so, there we are.
So those sorts of. I've more respect for people who do actually invest in finding a solution to the problem.
I agree.
Than stop at pointing it out. But maybe we're guilty of exactly what we're.
We're pointing a finger at the finger pointers. That's very true. Yeah, that is very true. I was saying that, to be fair, I am considering getting solar panels put on my roof. So,
there you go.
Try and do my bit, maybe. Considering it, they're bloody expensive still. That's the problem. Yeah. So there we are. Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, enough for today, I think.
I think, we went all over the place on that one, but that's not a bad thing. Yeah. But again, we always say, though, nothing exists in isolation, does it? Nothing exists in isolation. That's why we always go on to different topics.
Absolutely. Anyway, good talking to you, Jamie.
Yeah, you too. Take care, Tom.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.